Looking up at our moon from Earth, it's a gloriously pristine disk of reflected light, but nearly 400,000 kilometers of space is enough to hide a dirty secret on its surface. We have been visiting our celestial neighbour since the late 1950s, and we've taken over a little bit more than just a welcoming plate of cookies. We have sent probes and satellites, and of course humans, to take a closer look. And many of these space missions took more than photos and left more than just footprints. In the early days of the space race, during the 1960s, the US and USSR were sending up increasingly bigger rockets and payloads in preparation of becoming the first nation to put a man on the moon. Many of these crashed, some intentionally to be honest, onto the moon's surface. Others landed in one piece and sent back all important information that paved the way for future missions. Then, as we all know, in 1969, 2 American men stepped out of the Apollo 11 descent module and became the first to walk on the surface of the moon. Further manned missions followed, along with more spacecraft. And even though the space race is now long over, agencies are still sending instruments to study every aspect of the moon. And the thing is, pretty much all of those bits and bobs that we've sent over the last 60 years are still there. Mangled remains of the earliest spaceships, burnt-out rocket boosters, even the iconic descent stage of Apollo 11. The moon hosts the wreckage of nearly 70 space vehicles. See, getting there was the priority, and once the vehicle's job was done, they were simply abandoned. Admittedly, nearly 500,000 clicks is a long way to go just to pick up a few bits of metal, but the lunar littering doesn't end there. A total of 12 people have set foot on the moon on 6 separate missions, but these missions weren't just sightseeing jaunts. The crews were given a rigorous schedule of scientific experiments to complete, taking measurements and collecting samples. And to be able to get those valuable samples off the moon's surface, the astronauts had to jettison pretty much everything that they didn't need anymore, meaning loads of really awesome space hardware was simply left behind. There are 3 lunar rovers, for instance, and they've driven more than 90 kilometers, albeit at a speed of just 13 kph. They were designed to carry 2 astronauts and plenty of rock samples, but that has just made them too big and too heavy to bring home. And it wasn't just the big stuff that was abandoned either. Anything that wasn't needed for the return journey was at risk of being chucked out. The tools that they used to collect the samples, the TV cameras that filmed their lunar activities, insulating blankets and utility towels and personal hygiene kits, empty food packets, even 6 pairs of space boots. Around 100 pieces of litter were left from just the first moon landing alone. Perhaps the most unsavoury flotsam and jetsam are the 96 or so packages of human urine and faeces and vomit. See, missions could last several days, and when you gotta go, you gotta go. And you can kind of see why they wouldn't have wanted to make the return journey with that particular bit of luggage. Not everything that was left behind was out of necessity though. What better way to leave your mark on a moon than to literally leave something to mark your visit? The most obvious are those patriotic American flags, 6 in total, planted by each of the Apollo crews to make it to the surface. Only 5 are left standing though, since the first one, placed by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin of Apollo 11, was blown down as their spacecraft blasted off home. Whoops. Apollo 11 left a few other symbolic items as well. There was a plaque bearing the signatures of the crew and commemorating the first moon landing, a golden olive branch to symbolise peace for all mankind, and a small silicon disc, only slightly bigger than a 50p piece, which has messages from 73 world leaders etched on it in letters a quarter of the width of a human hair. But it wasn't all peace, patriotism and goodwill. Apollo 16 astronaut Charles Duke left a photograph of his family, while Alan Shepard took a break from his duties on the Apollo 14 mission to drive a couple of golf balls across the lunar surface with a foldable 6-iron that he smuggled along in a sock. There's art too. A small aluminium statue called the Fallen Astronaut was placed by the crew of Apollo 15 to commemorate the Americans and Russians that died in the scramble to reach the moon during the space race. And there's a tiny ceramic chip the size of a penny that bears doodles from artists of the time, including Andy Warhol. Now his is an Interesting contribution. It could be his signature or a spaceship, but it does look an awful lot like a certain male appendage. So bravo, Mr. Warhol, you got the first penis doodle on the moon. In total, the crashed spaceships, abandoned poo packets and symbolic paraphernalia make up nearly 190 tons of extra weight on the moon. That is the equivalent to the weight of about 30 African elephants, having made the epic journey to be left on the cratered surface. And although it's pretty spread out, the areas nearest those Apollo landing sites, which are protected as lunar heritage sites, are literally littered with litter. And that's meant that NASA's most recent probes have been forced to target areas far from these historic piles of trash. But no matter how hard you peer at the man in the moon, you won't be able to see man's mark from Earth. To have a go on a discarded lunar lander yourself, you're going to have to wait for the trash tourism trips to start up, which I actually think is quite a good idea. What would you go and visit on a trip to the moon? A pack of Buzz Aldrin's poo, a discarded golf ball, or probably more likely Warhol's doodle? Let me know in the comments below. Give us a like, subscribe to Earth Lab for more science originals, and I'll see you next time.